What's going on, everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new Zotac Zone handheld gaming PC. This is one that I've been super excited about and waiting on it for quite some time. I was actually able to go hands-on with this at Computex 2024 in Taipei, but the release was pushed back a little bit, at least in the US. And at the time of this video going live, I know of one retailer that will be carrying this in the US for Zotac, and that's going to be Micro Center. I will leave links in the description, but when I originally saw this in Taipei, I kind of fell in love with the overall design, and it's still my favorite handheld design to this day. Gray body, a little bit of gold under those analog sticks. They've added some silver here. Kind of reminds me of the Sword of Omens from Thundercats, but that's not the reason I like it. I just really do like the overall design. It's got those sharp edges at the bottom. They don't dig into your messing around with it, getting it out of the box. I find that it's got kind of a military feel to it. And what I mean by that is it's very sturdy. It's got some heft to it. It doesn't feel cheap at all. But when I kind of look at this thing, it does feel like a futuristic drone controller of some sort. Zotac did add a fingerprint sensor up top. We've also got our volume rocker, one USB 4 port up here, 3.5mm audio jack, and down here at the bottom, we've got another USB 4 port. Both of these are full function 40 gig and a micro SD card slot. Another cool thing about this is it's actually got a spot over here on this side for a lanyard, and I almost tore all of the packaging apart looking for the lanyard, but unfortunately it does not come with the unit, at least with the one I have. I went over to their website and it looks like they sell a carrying case, and that thing comes with the lanyard. Button layout is really nice. I mean, we've basically seen this before on other handhelds, but they've added a few new features here that aren't on a lot of other ones out there. It does have dual trackpads built in, and if you take a closer look at the analog sticks, it's got what they're calling radial dials around them, and these can actually be used for changing the brightness on the screen, brightness on the RGB around back, and volume control. You can kind of map these to either of those functions. We've also added 2-stage adjustable triggers, so you can set this up as a hair trigger if you want it, kind of like we see on the Elite controllers that are put out across the year for Xbox and PlayStation. We'll take a closer look at all of these features in just a bit, but I do want to give you a rundown on the specs. When it comes to the new Zotac Zone, this is powered by the AMD Ryzen 7 8840U. 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.3, and a boost up to 5.1. We get the RDNA 3 base 780M iGPU with 12 compute units, and this will clock up to 2700 MHz. 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X running at 7500 MHz. This supports a 2280 M.2 SSD, and base on this is 512, but it's easily upgradable. It also supports a micro SD card slot, but one of my favorite things here is the display. It's a 7-inch 120Hz AMOLED. It supports HDR, up to 800 nits of brightness. It's 150% sRGB and 100% DCI-P3. This thing looks good, and at 800 nits, it can get quite bright. Unfortunately, it doesn't support VRR or FreeSync. It does have Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, a 48.2 watt-hour battery, and this comes included with the 65-watt charger. And out of the box, this is running Windows 11. So again, yeah, this is my favorite looking handheld on the market. Love the aesthetics here. I think they did a pretty decent job putting this thing together. And with a lot of these new handhelds hitting the market, we see RGB around the analog sticks. They decided not to go that route and actually add it to the rear. This is a Spectra RGB strip that's fully controllable from software. And speaking of software, there's a lot that I want to go over, so I will move in closer in just a bit. But the overall feel of the unit is really solid. It's got Hall-based analog sticks. These are full size. Love the gold accents below. I think it looks really good like that. The face buttons have a nice feel, and the overall ergonomics here are great. There's one thing you might have noticed, and that's the weird looking D-pad. They're calling it a clicky D-pad, and it's really accurate. Originally, when I saw it, I thought to myself, what are they doing here? I didn't think that this would be good at all. Now, don't get me wrong, it wouldn't be my first choice. I'm not a huge fan of micro switches in my D-pad, but we will get into some testing in a bit, and I'll show you how well it actually works. Moving around to the back, we've got 2 programmable macro buttons, and of course, we've got those trigger switches. So this is pretty awesome, and I've seen this on like the Xbox Elite controller. If you want to set this up for, let's say, racing games where you need a lot of throw, you need a lot of play with it, you can leave it off. Or if you want that hair trigger, all you got to do is swap this out, and you've got a hair trigger, great for first-person shooters. And one thing to keep in mind is these are Hall-based, but I think when we switch them over to hair trigger mode, it's just a micro switch. I personally thought this was pretty cool, and this is something we haven't seen on a handheld gaming console yet. But yeah, the device is pretty comfortable. I haven't had any trouble playing this for extended periods of time. But there's something else we have up front here that I haven't really talked about, and that's going to be the dual trackpads. Personally, I really wouldn't want to play a game with these smaller trackpads here, but for navigating Windows or any other operating system really that we can install on this, it might work out really well for a lot of people out there. Our right-hand side is going to work as our main trackpad. It does have a left and a right click. The left side trackpad is going to allow us to scroll, and we've seen some other Windows handheld devices with trackpads built in, but nobody's ever done it as well as the Steam Deck. And this really doesn't come close to what the Steam Deck offers in terms of trackpads, but it's getting pretty close. This is one of the better ones that I've messed around with so far. I think the real issue here is Windows itself with these smaller trackpads. Next thing I wanted to show you were these radial dials, and there's 3 modes we can set these up in. We can adjust the rear RGB, we can set these up to adjust the screen brightness and volume, and we'll do this all through Zotac software. So I've got the left-hand side set up for brightness, right-hand side is going to adjust the rear RGB brightness. Now it would be nice if we had a few more modes that we could actually program these to, and I'm sure they could do it through software, it's just a bit limited to those 3 functions right now. Okay, so I definitely wanted to give you a closer look at Zotac's One launcher. Obviously, this comes pre-installed. It'll boot directly to this if you want it to. At the top, we've got our recently played or installed games. Right down here, it says metadata is powered by IGDB. Unfortunately, I just can't get Stalker 2 to populate here, but this is installed on my Żone through the Xbox app, and I'm sure something like this can be easily fixed, but as you can see, it has scraped all of my other games. And for instance, we'll go into Cyberpunk. Gives us some screenshots down here. Actually, it looks pretty good like this. I have not started this up on the Żone yet, but over here, default controller. I haven't set any other controller profile, so if I created a different profile, we could choose it from here. But we've also got our RGB on the back, and you can set this up per game. So if you wanted to go with rainbow, breathe, star, dance, fade, it's going to change the RGB on the Żone once we start a game up. We've got our menu right down here, and the Zotac button on the Żone itself will open this up for us. And one thing you might notice is we've got some popular games down here. This just kind of gives us a list of games that we might like to play. Now, there's no real rhyme or reason to it, at least at the time I'm making this video. These were just the ones that populated. I've actually only played these 2 right here, so let's see where this leads us. Okay, cool. Goes right to Steam. Not too bad. I have seen some launchers go to third-party sites, and, I guess they get a little bit of a cut when you buy the game. Pretty nice that it's going to Steam here. So this could come in handy for some people, and it would be pretty cool if it kind of just was based off of the games that you have installed or the games that you play. And who knows, it might be down the road with the One launcher. Got our library, just going to bring up our installed games. Media, nothing here. Platforms, it's just going to take us over to where we can download this. So I've got Xbox, Steam, go with GOG, EA, Ubisoft Connect. But of course, there are more out there. Heading into the menu, we've got our general settings. Language, clock, time zone, battery percentage. We can disable this if you don't want that percentage showing. We can calibrate, and I believe this is going to calibrate the controller. Yeah, I haven't had to yet. Analog sticks, everything seems to be working pretty good. We've also got network, Bluetooth, display. Right here, we can change the brightness of the built-in screen, resolution, refresh rate, lock screen. We can totally disable this if we want to. Audio, volume, it's got that built-in microphone. You can choose the input and output. Fan, auto seems to work pretty decently here, but we do have a manual mode and we can change a curve. But I'll tell you, even with this thing maxed out, it's not as loud as some other handhelds out there on the market. I've been sticking to auto, does a pretty good job. And of course, we've got our performance section. This is where some people are going to spend a lot of their time. So from the drop down, we've got a default, quiet, this is 8 watts. We've got a balanced, which takes it up to 15, performance, 28, and you can create your own profiles. So for max, you can see I've gone up to 30 watts. Our energy performance preference, more on the GPU side, but while you're tweaking and tuning this, we can go all the way over to the CPU, all the way over to the GPU. We can enable or disable the boost, plus we can change it to aggressive or efficient. Power mode, so this is kind of our Windows power profile. Obviously in max mode, I want to go up to performance. and our additional VRAM size. So let's say I wanted to create a new one here. We'll just go ahead and go up to do 18 watts. For this, you can go right in the middle. I'm going to enable that CPU boost power mode. And if we wanted to, we could add a little more VRAM. Out of the box, it's set to 4 gigs, but we will have to reboot if we do this. But yeah, I haven't seen this energy performance preference yet on these handhelds. Well, at least with stock software. Pretty cool, and it's something that I'll definitely be experimenting with. You can also rename this. So we went to 18. There we go. So we can set up our own custom TDP profiles. Controller, gamepad, desktop. Basically 2 different modes. From gamepad, we've got our default, but we can create a new one. I'm just going to go into default. Just going to give us an idea of everything that's going on here. Joystick, dead zone, outer threshold can be totally adjusted from here. Same as the triggers and vibration. This actually has some pretty decent haptics. Default is going to be 100%. You don't want that. You can create a custom profile and just turn everything down. But yeah, we can totally remap each button here, creating your own profile. Desktop is a bit different. Gives us the layout and how to use this in desktop mode. Games. Everything we've got installed, and even through here, yeah, it didn't scrape any of that metadata, but we've got information about each of these other games. Hopefully that's something that'll be fixed. Spectra, this is our Zotac Spectra lighting around back. Speed, we've also got the brightness, and a few different custom presets. Rainbow, breathe, star, dance, fade. I'm sitting up around 25%. It's pretty bright like this, but if we take it on up, you can really make this thing shine. And at the very bottom, we've got our disk space. It's going to give us an idea of how much space we have left on our hard drive. But overall, I think the Zotac One launcher is coming along pretty nicely. A couple things I'd like to see: an on-screen FPS counter, something that I actually could not find in here, and the ability to kind of change the artwork. So if I go in here, basically I can uninstall the game. I've got that RGB. Even if I long press on that, let's see, nothing happens. So let me test one thing. I actually didn't try this yet. Let's see. Nope, I was hoping I could do something here. Along with the Zotac One launcher, we've also got a quick menu. Really easy to bring up, pressing this key on the zone. Inside of a game, it's just going to make it easy to kind of change the brightness, volume, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. We can also go through, change our controller profile, resolution, refresh rate, and we can adjust performance directly from here. And it does look like from the quick menu, we just kind of have a custom adjustment. I don't see any adjustment for those presets, but yeah, this is something I've actually been using, just kind of adjusting the TDP while playing games. It's pretty nice. We've got that quick menu, but again, I'd love to see an on-screen FPS counter, and I'd also like to be able to kind of customize each one of these. Jumping right into a little bit of gaming, we're starting off light here with Shredder's Revenge. I wanted to give you a look at the battery draw, and right now I'm at 1080 with this game. There's no other graphic settings that we can change, but I am at 120 Hertz because we've got that 120 AMOLED display. And in total from the battery, with the screen brightness set at 50%, we're pulling anywhere from 8.3 to 8.4 watts. And we are at 120. If I take this down to 60, there's a chance it would drop down just a bit. But the way it's looking right now, at least for these indie games, we can see some pretty decent battery life out of this thing, even though we've got a 48.5 watt-hour battery. Now it's time to test out this funky D-pad. And again, they're calling it a clicky D-pad. It's pretty interesting because it allows you to kind of hear exactly what you're doing. And to tell you the truth, I never thought I'd be interested in a D-pad like this, but as you can see, I can pull these moves off pretty easily here. And having that sound, the feedback and everything like that really does kind of remind me of an arcade stick. Moving over to Cyberpunk 2077, 1080 low with some FSR. I really wanted to get in here to just show you that hair trigger. Right now it's in linear mode, and there's a lot of action here to get everything to fire. So if we flip this thing around, we're going to go ahead and swap this over, and it's just one tap. Basically, it takes that linear trigger and turns it into a single click trigger. And by the way, when it comes to performance, this is on par with the ROG Ally X. Even though we've got that 8840U, It's basically the same thing as that Z1 Extreme, and the Z1 Extreme is basically this chip with the NPU removed. The Radeon 780M does clock up to 2700 megahertz, so you can expect that kind of performance out of this thing. And I'll show you what I'm talking about with a few games. Stalker 2, 900p, low with frame gen on, and I really wasn't expecting to see this kind of performance out of this game. It actually runs really well on this, and of course it'll also run really well on the ROG Ally X, but you do have to take that resolution down and enable frame gen if you don't want to play this at 30. Either way, it handles it just fine. Checking out Overwatch 2, 1080 medium. We don't need FSR, and sorry if the video's a little blown out. This screen is super bright, and I really did kind of forget to bring this under 60% while filming the screen. But esports games, even at lower wattages like 15 to 18, depending on the game you're playing, are going to run great on the 8840U. Elden Ring is still one of those games that's given us issues on these iGPUs if we want to get up to that 60 FPS mark. I had to drop this down to 900p, and I'm at a low-medium mix, but it's pretty steady at 60. Every once in a while, it does dip under. To tell you the truth, I've got more of the settings at low than I do at medium, but it still looks good at 900p on this AMOLED. Ratchet and Clank, Rift Apart, really awesome game, but without frame gen, you will need to take it down to 900. So we're at medium settings, and I am using IGTI scaling instead of FSR here. It's set to balance. I personally find that in most cases, it does work a bit better. And finally, we've got God of War Ragnarok, 1080 low settings with frame gen enabled, 18 watt TDP, and I've had really good luck on these RDNA 3 iGPUs with this game. One of my favorite ports over from PlayStation so far because, yeah, on these lower end systems, it just works amazingly. The last thing I want to talk about here is battery life. And from what I've seen so far with that 48.5 watt hour battery, screen brightness at 50%, 2D indie games at a 10 watt TDP, you can get 4+ hours. Definitely on par with others out there. AAA gaming at 15 watts, about 2 hours. If you wanted to go all out in performance mode at a 28 watt TDP, you're looking at about an hour and 20 minutes. And this is falling right in line with other handhelds that have that same watt-hour battery. But of course, there are handhelds on the market with much larger batteries. And even at those higher TDPs, you can basically double the runtime with those. First impressions here, I do love the look and overall feel. I think the button layout is great. Analog sticks, awesome. That D-pad is way better than I ever thought it would be. I went into this kind of wanting to hate the D-pad, but it works out pretty well. I was kind of surprised by that. RGB around back is a nice touch. It's got those track pads if you need them, and I love this display. Now, I wish it was variable refresh rate or at least FreeSync compatible, but the AMOLED display they have here at 1080p looks beautiful. I mean, it's a really bright, vibrant display, super deep blacks. 800 nits of brightness, in my opinion, is more than enough for a handheld like this. And when it comes to performance, It's an 8840U paired up with 7500 MHz RAM. So you can expect the same kind of performance we're seeing out of the Legion Go, the ROG Ally X, and other handhelds on the market with either the Z1 Extreme or an 88 variant with that 780Mi GPU. So is it worth picking up? Well, in the end, it's always going to be up to you, but just keep in mind there are other handhelds out there around this same price point that do have larger batteries. Now, those handhelds don't have trackpads built in, they don't have these dual stage triggers or an AMOLED display, but they do have features that we're not seeing over here, like a VRR display and a larger battery. So, I mean, it's really up to you. You're not going to lose any performance going over here. Basically, the main trade-off is going to be battery life. But again, I just can't get over how good this looks, and I'm sure there's people out there that don't like the overall design, but yeah, this is my favorite looking handheld on the market right now. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. I really appreciate you watching. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they will be selling this at Micro Center, and as soon as the links are live, they might be right now. I'll leave them in the description, so definitely keep an eye out if you want to learn a little more. But if there's anything else you want to see running on the Zotac Zone, or if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.